Hi, Jim here with my thoughts for today, and today we're going to be talking about trade, economics, and a little bit about tariffs, but the main subject, that's all part of one large subject, and the large subject is, as I say in the title to today's thoughts, how America is getting screwed. I mean, I wish a president would be a little more diplomatic about the way he phrases things. Say, well, here are, which I'm going to do in a moment, just put up a chart, show the differences in tariffs, talk about what we'll be talking about today, non-trade barriers, and give those examples and say, we Americans, we love our friends around the world, but this is just not fair. But he just says, well, America's getting ripped off. They've been ripping us off long enough, and it can't go on anymore. He's right about that, as I'm going to be talking today, but I wish he'd be a little more diplomatic about it, because that's not really very statesman-like, we'll just say. But anyways, let's, I said there are tariffs and there are non-trade barriers. One of them I mentioned before, so I won't dwell on it today. It's in an earlier vlog. It was about VAT, value-added tax, and well, basically that manufacturers have to pay this price domestically in their own countries, but when they ship to America, they are exempt from. There is no value add, no VAT, so it makes their product cheaper in our country, actually, than it would be for their own people in their own country. But that's a small item. There are other items I'm going to talk about today. But first of all, let's just talk about tariffs so we get an idea of what we're talking about here. And on tariffs alone, let me put up this chart. What you're looking at, as you can probably tell, is a chart of the tariffs that other countries charge us for certain products and what we charge them. And let's just go right across, left to right. So Canada, dairy products, we charge an 11%. That's us on the right of each of these categories. And then the foreign countries on the left. So you can see we charge an 11% tariff. Canada, 212%. Japan on rice, okay, rice, 4%, that's what we charge, that's our tariff on Japanese rice coming into this country. And aside, I really like Japanese rice, and when I make certain Japanese dishes, I buy Japanese rice, so I buy it here. But they're 154% tariff. Liquor in India, we have no tariff. Zero, no tariff on liquor coming from India, 150% on us. Mushrooms and truffles, I am guessing it would be mushrooms for us. I don't know any truffles domestically produced in the United States, but anyways, so we'll just stick with mushrooms. But 12% we charge, that's our tariff on the European Union, 134% the tariff on us. And finally, India, cars. We charge, I don't know what cars are manufactured in India, whether it's their domestic brand or we have factories in a lot of countries. But anyways, we charge 3%, they 125%. So you see the discrepancy there. You see how that is not, in our opinion, fair. But there are we just believe that is unfair. And all Trump is talking about is reciprocity, is that whatever you charge us on your tariffs, we're going to charge you. But there are other barriers too. One of them I can tell you from personal experience. I don't know if I mentioned it before. I live in Tennessee now, but I used to live in New York. And when I lived in New York for a number of years, I used to bank. My bank was TD Bank. TD Bank. TD stands for Toronto Dominion. That's what it used to be called. And then, as you know, companies do, they shorten it. Just like Federal Express is now FedEx officially. Dunkin' Donuts is now officially Dunkin', because that's how people refer to it. But so TD Bank, Canadian bank, operating branches all over the country. They were even my bank. So you can imagine my surprise that there are no American banks in Canada. Why are there no American banks in Canada? Because Canada does not allow American banks to operate in Canada. And these are, these things that, all those steps, they have only one purpose, and that's to protect their own their own producers. Don't get me started on French farmers. And you reduce a tariff or something like that, then they dump manure in the middle of the highway. And just I talked in the past about my being on a being caught in a traffic jam from a farmer's strike in Germany. They just got in their little, their tractors and just drove them up and down the street. So, 10 miles an hour. So you just, well, don't get me started on that. But so that's, I understand their problem, but it's their problem. It's not our problem. And if the French farmers dump manure in the street, and if German farmers drive their tractors around every street at 10 miles an hour, and they go in a long line, it's like waiting for a train. Yeah, I got caught at an intersection, and I had to wait for all these tractors going 10 miles an hour to go by before I could just drive across the street. But it doesn't affect me in America. I just care what the relative costs and the shipping duties and all that. And there was just today, as I'm recording this on Friday, you're seeing it on Monday, the CEO of an American company, Marlin Steel. Let me get this number here for you. I wrote it here. This is my handwriting. These are how I take notes. For those of you who say I'm a little scattered sometimes, well, that's why. This is how I take notes. But anyways, Marlin Steel, they make stainless steel baskets, and he said that the cost to a German company to ship steel baskets or steel products to the United States in the shipping containers, $125. His price to ship his stainless steel baskets to Europe, $12,896. Now you tell me how that's fair. It's obviously not. And another one, I'll just go, I was just looking at an article, it was from 2023, I'm not going to put it up, but let's see if I can find it here. Do I still have it? Let's see. No, I don't have it. But it was Airbus Airbus needs additional subsidies to produce their next model, their new plane. And that's the other thing. You can name, I could be here all day probably naming products that are in other countries that are subsidized by their government to make them easier, to make them cheaper to ship overseas. So an Airbus is one of those. That's a big deal. There are really only two companies if you're talking about civilian air travel, Boeing and Airbus. Airbus is subsidized by the government. Boeing does not get those same subsidies. And I won't, because I haven't researched it. You can find me wrong on this if I say no subsidies, but I don't think they do. They have government contracts. They produce military planes for the military, for which they are paid, but perhaps Airbus does the same thing. But the point is that domestically, for commercial air travel, Airbus is actually, it's a consortium. That's what's interesting. It's not a private company that somebody like Boeing is. It was just Europe decided we want to have our own commercial aircraft production capability, and it's three countries. It's Britain, France, and Germany, and they formed a consortium, and that is Airbus. And those three governments subsidize. They pay for Airbus to, number one, produce the planes, and to be able to sell them at a price that's competitive with Boeing. They wouldn't be able to do that without the subsidies. That's why they need the subsidies. That's why that article, that's from 2023. So I don't know what's going on today, but they say they need additional subsidies, meaning that they're already getting subsidies. They need additional subsidies because they cannot finance the development of the next model airplane, whatever the next model up is from 2023. They can't afford it because it's a government-run aircraft industry, because they decided that they want one, and those are just that's the other thing that Trump is talking about. You can argue about VAT, you can argue about shipping costs, you can argue about government subsidies. The whole point is that other countries are doing all these things to keep our products out of their country, or allow them into the country, but to make them so expensive that they can't compete. I know, I think I mentioned in an earlier vlog, California wines are as good as French wines. Champagne has to be produced in the Champagne district of France, so to be called champagne. So we call it sparkling wine, but it's the same stuff. It's sparkling wine, and America is now in California's is good, unless maybe you're talking about $10,000 a bottle of wine, which I've seen in New York. This one liquor store, wine store, I couldn't believe it. I looked at they have the budget wines, and I went to the expensive section, and there were bottles of wine for $10,000, which you can imagine had locks on the, so you couldn't just lift the bottle. But our products are as good as they're. I mean, I told you about mushrooms. A mushroom is a mushroom, for heaven's sakes, and that's I think I've exhausted this subject pretty well, but you can see, hopefully understand how we Americans feel about this, and that's all we're talking about. That's all Trump is saying, that we are going to, whatever you're doing, whatever barrier you're putting up on our products, and to my knowledge, and I'd be surprised if we told Toronto, TD Bank, you have to close all your branches, get out of the United States. But it's perfectly fair to say that, well, we have American banks, we want to open bank branches in Canada, and we want to compete with your Canadian banks. And this is what we're seeing all over the world. These barriers put up to keep American products for competing with their products. And Trump has had enough, and when he says he's had enough, he speaks for a lot of Americans, including me. And that's it for today. Thanks for stopping by. Comments always welcome in the comment section below the video. Share this video with anyone you think would benefit from it. But most of all, come back and see me again. I'd love to see all of you again. And until I do see all of you again, bye.